International. Thank you. And it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of a range of stakeholders and partners, including the Food System Summit Dialogues, the UN Environment Program, Center for Earth Ethics, Tucci, Parliament of World Religions, and others. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Just a few, this is the second dialogue in a three-part series celebrating the power of faith communities and equitable, resilient, and sustainable food system transformation, all in the lead up to the Food System Summit Stocktake, which is happening at the end of the month. Just a few housekeeping notes. We'll be recording this call for future reference. We plan to have a time for Q&A near the end of the call, so please do share your questions along the way in the Q&A function. You'll see the button at the bottom of the screen. And we also have translations available in Spanish, French, and Arabic. Today, because of how Zoom is working today, the Arabic will be on the Portuguese channel. So use the global icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You'll see the languages and you can select your language of choice. So in the lead up to 21 Food System Summit, interfaith leaders joined a range of other stakeholders to discuss the unique and essential ways that faith and Indigenous actors have engaged with and supported food systems transformation. These included the refreshing Faith and Food Coalition pre-summit dialogues and the Food Systems Secretariat hosted Global Interfaith Dialogue. The 2021 Food Systems Summit Interfaith Call to Action and the Faith and Food Coalition Interfaith Statement, which we'll drop in the chat, really drew on this beautiful values-based understanding and approach and reflections. Want to read to you some of what emerged there because I think it will set our conversation today really well. Our story of food is one of sacred joy, interconnectivity, dignity, empathy. To eat food, especially healthy, nutritious food, is to experience our interdependence with nature, fully embracing the land we live on and those who have nurtured the food that's provided for us to eat. Food is both a building block of life and a basic human right. Sharing food is an expression of our love, a way we care for each other, exchange culture and history, and remind ourselves that we're part of the wider world. So as we approach the official Food System Summit Stocktake in July, we're coming back together to reflect in another series of dialogue how we're doing and consider how we can move forward together more effectively. This is the second in a three-part series. The first call brought together leaders and representatives of key decision makers and policymakers. This we'll get to do a deep dive into some case studies and experiences from local faith and Indigenous communities. And then the final discussion, an official Food System Summit side event, will happen on 25th July at 6 p.m. Rome time. And that will bring these dialogues together. We're with global leaders and local actors drawing on good practice to reflect on how far we've come and how far we still have to go, and to make some recommendations to further grow our effective collaboration for food system transformation. So now I have the great privilege of introducing to you our moderator for today, Dr. Manoj Kurian. He is the coordinator of the WCC, World Council of Churches Ecumenical Advocacy Alliance. He's a Malaysian medical doctor, trained in community health and health systems management. He worked for 7 years in mission hospitals and diverse rural contexts in India. And he's headed the health work at WCC for 13 years. He also worked at the International AIDS Society as a senior manager looking at policy and advocacy work. And he's an adjunct faculty at the College of Public Health at Kent State. So without further ado, Dr. Manoj, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, can you hear me? Thank you very much, Andrea. And it's my privilege to introduce the three speakers who will bring these local faith community good practices towards this dialogue. Patrick Sa is a dynamic humanitarian leader bringing about more than 15 years of experience in strategic and operational leadership of humanitarian programs in non-profit organizations. He has managed complex emergencies in the Sahel and the Central African region in countries such as Guinea, Central African Republic, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, Nigeria, and now in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Currently, Patrick leads World Vision's humanitarian response strategy in the Democratic Republic of Congo with more than $70 million portfolio on food and cash reimbursements and wash and livelihood, health and nutrition, education, protection programming. The second speaker is Denise Livingston. Denise Livingston, who is a public health professional from DNA in New Mexico, is an unapologetic food justice organizer, an Ashoka fellow, and an indigenous public health systems consultant. As of May this year, she was named as one of the University of Mexico's new Tribal Data Champion Fellows. Denisa has been a legislative speaker and community health advocate for the Dine Community Advocacy Alliance for a decade this year. And the DCAA has been globally recognized for the successful passage of several laws, this first of its kind, the elimination of tax on healthy foods with an emphasis on indigenous foods, and the Healthy DNA National Act of 2014 or unhealthy food tax, and a tax revenue allocation for community wellness projects for more than 110 Navajo chapters. The third speaker is Shaza Hamo, who is a dedicated advocate for women's empowerment and the director of the Aman Foundation in northwestern Syria, which is in the region of Idlib, and a member of the MENA Women's Coalition. With a degree in child and educational psychology from the Aleppo University, Shaza has committed the past 2 decades, to championing women's rights and advancing the status in the local community. At the Aman Foundation, Shaza leads a compassionate team with aims to uplift women facing various challenges. The foundation acts as a sanctuary, offering a nutritive and a protective environment where women can develop new skills, seek support, and regain their self-worth. So these are three amazing speakers. So welcome to all three of you. So what I would do is now we will start off with a primary question, and each of you will be given around 5 to 7 minutes to respond to each of these questions. So the first question to you three is, how has your local faith-based organization or network worked towards food systems transformation? Who will go first? Patrick?
Yes, I can go first. Thank you very much again for this webinar, faith involvement in food stock taking. So I will be giving a specific case study on the Democratic Republic of Congo with regards to our work with faith leaders and faith-based organizations and the food systems, and also in other related sector that support food. To begin with this question, I would like to say that DRC is a country that is divided into 4 regions, and every region has a specific cultural values and specific language. And there has been a lot of issues around trust and building confidence among the different regions. So the faith community comes in as a bridge to ensure that the trust people have with each other, faith community bridge that gap to ensure that people are able to relate to the faith communities. So the faith community in the DRC is very trusted, and it's also a community that people build confidence and is highly respected in the DRC. And for that reason, they serve as a bridge in strengthening the food system in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And also, they serve also as a coordination mechanism to build and that resilience within the food systems. One of the greater things they have been doing as faith leaders, how have they been engaging in terms of food and other related interventions in the DRC? They have been very much involved into coordination system, where they have been even taking leadership role to ensure that potential faith organizations, faith networks are identified to be able to align themselves together and support the food systems in terms of food distribution, and also they also support in terms of livelihood and related association. They've also been equipped with skills, potential skills for transformation programming in the food system. So they serve as influencers. They are very influential in the food system, and they work with all different actors, including World Vision. They are our key partners in ensuring that the coordination of the food system, including food distribution to the most vulnerable population, and also targeting RDPs, the internally displaced persons, and also refugees. They have been very much engaged in the coordination of different activities that relates to food distribution, livelihood intervention, and also creating savings groups and also farmers association. They have been very much instrumental in that. They have been engaged into trainings as well. We've been able to work with faith leaders to empower them, provide them the necessary skills on the channel of hope intervention, where they have been able to develop their own action plan and work within the action plans to build resilience among the population. They've also been able to use their action plan to engage other stakeholders in responding to food-related intervention within the DRC. Faith leaders also have been, or the faith community, faith-based organizations have been, we've been able to utilize their skills. So they have a deposit of knowledge, a wealth of skills that is being utilized within the humanitarian system and also the development system, especially when we talk about the Nexus programming. They are very much instrumental and very influential in making sure that their skills, they are then being entrenched within the different communities. They have been able to transform lives with regards to the food and livelihood savings group sector. They also are very credible. The faith-based organization are reliant group. These are a group of people that every community and every actor would like to work with because of the trust and the reliance and the hope that the most affected population builds in this group. As such, they are seen to be the first respondent in the event of conflict or crisis. They seem to have a wealth of sustainable approaches because they are locally based. They are entrenched within the communities. So these are different ways how the faith leaders have been utilized and how we've been engaging them into different food stock-taking interventions. Lastly, before I close on this first question, faith leaders has also been involved into, we have been able to use their facilities as first responder in the event of crisis, for example. So when there's a crisis in any part of this country, the first location where the most vulnerable population see to go is to find safety in the churches or in schools that have been constructed by faith leaders. So they bring wealth of local resources to ensuring that the safety and the different food intervention for the most vulnerable population are considered. So their facilities sometimes have been used as warehouses to store food, in order to provide this assistance to the most vulnerable population. Their facilities are being used as a protection safety net for the most vulnerable population. So these are some of the ways how the faith communities, including faith-based organizations and churches, have been very much involved and influential in the workings of World Vision DRC and the DRC. I will stop there so far. Thank you. Over to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Fantastic. Now let's hear Denise. What is your response to this query?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yatse, I just want to introduce myself in my Dene language. She Denise Livingston in Shia Kiluchitni Nisha. Chishidina Ebashichin, Oze Dina Tachini Dashache, Do Nanish Eja Tachini Dashanella. I see that Nasha A Taragon will yeah, Diagut Dinishila. Welcome, everyone. I just introduced myself in my Dene language. I am in the Southwest area of the United States, originally from the state of New Mexico in our traditional homelands called Dinetka. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion, and I have a brief presentation to share with everyone. And I was one of the appointed champions of the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit. And so talking about transformation and the local level language of food transformation is really critical as we steward our food systems and address colonization, address systemic racism, address the impacts of food colonialism, and also talking about culinary colonialism. As Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, which is Canada and US and Mexico, we are reclaiming Native truth and talking about the narratives that have harmed our communities, and also working towards collective action to be able to facilitate some change and also the dialogues that have harmed our communities. And so I'm really excited. As I share with you, I lead an organization called Dene Community Advocacy Alliance, based here in the Southwest area of the US. And what we've been known for is really our work on food policies. Food is something that is very holy to us. We make our goals and also our influences based on how our ancestors have helped us to step into this difficult work, but also addressing colonization that has displaced our people, that has manipulated our food systems to have mostly unhealthy food. And so what we did as a community that was community-led, we worked on a couple of pieces of legislation. And one of those that is known, it's the only unhealthy foods tax in the US. As of 2020, we raised over $9 million and funded over 1,000 community wellness projects that improves the physical and the social well-being of the communities on the Navajo Nation in my tribal community. And what we also wanted to address is the taxation on healthy food. We've seen on the outside of our nation that there was no tax on healthy food, and we were being taxed when more than half of my people live under the poverty rate. And so we wanted to emphasize the need to be able to have tax-free Dene foods, Navajo foods, and also Indigenous foods. And so we've been working on this initiative for over a decade now, addressing what was never a part of our diet. Before colonization, we never had the word unhealthy food. And so we had to create the word here, as you can see on the bottom, it's Ian Bijol. Ian in Dene means food, and Bijol means the scraps, the crap, the unhealthy food, the prison food, the food that does not belong in our bodies, the non-nutritious foods. And so it has really been an emotional time as we think about creating change in our communities, but also recycling the unhealthy foods tax into wellness projects. And this is led by communities. And so here is a dream list of what the communities are able to use the funds for. It's not limited to walking trails or exercise equipment. It's talking about traditional intergenerational wellness. It's talking about traditional intergenerational classes, food preparation classes, talking about environmental health, talking about education and farming and vegetable gardens, and reclaiming our traditional heirloom foods to be able to grow those during really a difficult time through this pandemic that we have faced. And also address the inequities and the disparities that have existed before the pandemic. And so the pandemic has really emphasized the need to be able to speak about our food systems, and the world has seen how vulnerable our food systems is. And so through the pandemic, we went through the legislative process in the Navajo Nation government to be able to renew this Healthy Dene Nation Act. And this was something that we did collectively with my family. Here's a picture of, I'm standing here on the right side with our Navajo Nation president, the vice president, my grandma, my mother, and myself. You can see the 3 generations as we do this work together in community, but being really led by those prophecies that our ancestors have held and that have given to us, to talk and to address climate resiliency, to plan towards the strategies to think about climate change, to think about how we are caring for Mother Earth and praying for Mother Earth, especially in this time. And it was such a dire time as NASA shared photos of the Navajo Nation during this severe drought that we have been experiencing, and also seeing the heat wave that is coming through and the highest temperatures where I am at in the US this week. It's about 114 degrees, and that is
m'excuser, j'avais perdu la connexion parce que le courant a été coupé, je suis de retour.
someone is speaking. If you're not a speaker, can you please mute yourself, please? And so as we think about our Dene language and think about Indigenous languages, it is the UNESCO's decade of Indigenous languages. And so what we are trying to do is revitalize our language. For example, we've been holding virtual gatherings, and one of them recently is Indigenous Foodways. And this one here in our language translates to Hodishdan Chiyan Ba Honit. And so this is something, that we have been placing our emphasis on, is really the 3 pillars about community engagement, and also healing and leadership, and what that looks like in our food systems. And I created this image with a global mindset that as Indigenous peoples, we are addressing the challenges and also the need to be able to work with community members, that the solutions come from the community members. And so our elders here have created some ads that we shared on social media, and thinking about grandmother's food is medicine, thinking about how they want to address the younger generation in using our language, but talking about our food systems. And also what we've been doing is reaching the youth. And so we are part of creating food tastings, talking about gastronomy, talking about the need to be able to host events for our youth, to be engaged, to learn about the histories of our foods, and also to build a relationship to food, because it is very holy and sacred to us. And our ancestors have given us strength and given us courage as we think about how we create solutions for the next generations, in thinking about the innovation, but also the creativity on how we conduct our events together in song, in prayer, and then also how we focus in on the need to be able to think about working with elected leaders. So elected leaders, tribal leaders. Here is recently our visitation with the Navajo Nation President, Dr. Boo Nygren. We were at his office last month. He signed what is called the Sheep is Life proclamation, which is to protect the Navajo Churro lamb, and also an initiative to be able to think about how we stewarded the Navajo Churro lamb. And this is something that has been a part of our culture that was introduced by the Spaniards, but has been one of our survival foods. And so as we think about eating together and also stewarding the work together, we're working with tribal leaders to be able to do that. And as well as placing emphasis on Indigenous public health systems, thinking about how we decolonize methods, how we build healing-informed mechanisms and edifying strategies for empowerment, but really thinking about building trust, because trust drives a lot of the data. And this is something that we speak about too, is data sovereignty and the need to be able to understand who is creating the knowledge, how knowledge is created, and also how we are able to exhibit the knowledge that we are learning, but also creating. Seed sovereignty is a part of the work that we are doing. Through the pandemic, we've been able to trade seeds with different tribes and also distribute those seeds and help our people to be able to have a garden, also container planting. We know that people do not have the health to be able to do this. And so how do we also scale at that level for an individual to be able to at least have a couple of plants or have a couple of raised beds that they're able to manage? And so here are some resources for you all. If you have not seen the film Gather, it's an amazing film of our Indigenous relatives here in the US. We have the Indigenous Food Sovereignty in the US, which has won 4 international government awards, thinking about narratives from the community. Recipes from Turtle Island, that is a free download. You can go to our website at www.dineadvocacy.org, and I can also share the link. And then also this book that was published by Georgetown University called Unfinished Conversations on Democracy, Race, the Economy, and a Path Forward. And as well as there's a new book coming out next month, and that is called The Slow Lane, thinking about social innovation and working with communities around that. We want to emphasize also in my last couple of slides here, the need to be able to let's eat in, let's eat together, let's gather together, let's create food together, and stop, on trying to get takeout, most of the time, or fast food. We address, the CRAP, the CRAP, carbonated, refined, artificial processed foods, and having this global campaign of Let's Eat Indigenous. My last couple of slides just talks about the international work that we have been doing. We have created what is called the Slow Food Turtle Island Association. We travel to Italy every other year for the largest food conference, Terra Madre Saloon de Gusto. Every other year there is the Indigenous international events. We created the International Terra Madre Network with Slow Food Foundation. And here is some images of our recent gathering from last fall from the participants of Slow Food Turtle Island. That includes chefs, advocates, youth, elders, really engaging in the dialogue that is much needed in the world. And here's an image when we were in northern Japan, when Japan recognized the Ainu people as Indigenous people. So we came in solidarity to support them and brought 150 leaders from around the world to be able to engage in this. Here is a slide that really just speaks to the motions that we passed. I was elected as the first Indigenous woman as a Slow Food International Indigenous Counselor of the Global North. And my co-counselor was Nicholas Mashumbi from the DRC, from the Bimbuti people representing the Global South. And at our Congress last year, we passed these motions, and you can just see the diversity, but also the need to be able to address racism and to address the need to have women at the forefront and recognizing their role in agriculture, and as well as solidarity economy, talking about water, youth involvement, the University of Gastronomic Sciences as a model for school-supported agriculture, and as well as the defense of certain heritage foods throughout the world. And hopefully you guys will be able to do some research on that and share that with your communities. Here's a picture with our team for the advisory board for the Slow Food Indigenous Terra Madre Network. And so thank you all for listening. I know I just only have a few minutes to be able to present to you some of the transformation, but also that we may be the generation to set the foundation for future generations. And this may take time. And that's what we realize, is that taste education is also reprogramming our tongue for transformation, and also reprogramming the way that we're planting, what we're planting, and also what we are putting on our palates and our plates when we eat food, and thinking about how holy and also how sacred our food system is. Thank you. Back to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Denise. I mean, we had Denise, Patrick, and Denise have given us such fantastic presentations. We have one more speaker, then we will, I'll try to summarize it, and then we need to go into the next question. Sorry, we need to go to the next question before me summarizing it. But I was told that Shazo Hamo did manage to enter the room. Can we hear? Shazo is speaking in Arabic, so you'll have to make sure you have turned on your interpretation.
Yeah, I think Shaza still has connectivity issues and has not yet joined.
Okay. We are really sorry, because Shazo is actually speaking from Idlib region in Syria, and they have power failures, and this is one of the big challenges you see. But of course, the positive side is that we are able to gather from around the world. But the negative aspect is there are still places which has huge problems of connectivity. So when we sit around the table, we need to remember the people who are not around this table and keep those chairs empty. And those voices need to be, you have to imagine them. But as soon as she comes in, we will give her the opportunity to come in. Denise and Patrick, I have one more follow-up question. The question is, what is the unique role of faith values or the faith community in driving this transformation? Patrick?
Yes, so for this second question, I will do a brief slideshow so that just 1 minute, please. Okay, great. And I would like to speak to the second question that has to do with the unique roles of faith community, of faith interfaith leaders into the food system. The first thing I would want to say is that the context of the DRC has motivated challenges, and food insecurity is a major factor that we are addressing today in the DRC. Amidst the food insecurity, there are issues around climate change, protracted armed conflicts. There is also economic recession and many other hazards with regards to epidemic, pandemic that have created increased fragility in the context of DRC. And because of this increased fragility, the faith community has a major role to play. They are locally based, they are trusted, they are respected, and they have a very major key role to play in strengthening the food system and ensuring that communities, the most affected population, have access to food and also have access not just to food, but to continuous sustainability continuation, and also to make sure that they are able to regenerate more income that will lead the family into autonomization. So these are some of the unique roles faith leaders or faith communities have played in the food system strengthening in the DRC. Like as mentioned earlier, they have always been the first respondent during emergencies. So when there is a conflict, I just informed you about the different contexts we have in the DRC. In the event of every displacement, population movement, faith community, faith-based organization, churches, local churches are the first respondent. They're the first people that receive displaced population. So their churches have been offered to host displaced population. And so they are seen as middle stakeholder in the entire humanitarian system. They also serve the role of advocacy. Faith community or faith-based organization ensure that the different structure or the different stakeholders involved into humanitarian assistance or food assistance, they played an advocacy role to ensure that the local communities are receiving the necessary assistance they need to. And they also played an advocacy role between the government and the humanitarian actors. In the event of access, for example, faith community play a major role because they are locally based, they are grassrooted, and they play a very major role on the access issue. They played an advocacy role in ensuring that government is held accountable to ensure that there is access to the most vulnerable population to provide the necessary assistance to them. They also played a role of mobilization. They are very good at mobilizing the community because of the trust that is being built over the years with these communities and with the different vulnerable groups. So they play a very great mobilization role to build, and they build resilience within the community. They raise hope through the channel of hope intervention. They make sure that the communities are trusted and they are able to build self-resilience in ensuring that they are able to grow more food for their sustainability. Faith leaders also are able to shift harmful social norms within the communities because in most instances, they are reliant. So organizations work with faith leaders to shift social norms. For example, a case study during the Ebola in the DRC, there were a lot of myths, a lot of misconception about Ebola, even about the vaccine as well. So faith structures were the major factors in shifting those social norms, in shifting those social values, those myths and those misrepresentation about the concept of Ebola and its vaccine, including COVID-19. So they play a very key role in shifting the social norms in society. They also played a role in breaching the food system gap within the health system and also the community. For example, maternal health care, including nutrition, faith communities played a key role linking lactating mothers, linking malnourished children to health facilities to ensure that they are able to get the necessary treatment, especially cases of malnutrition. Faith leaders play a very critical role in terms of following up with health institutions, making sure that the vulnerable population, including children, pregnant women, and lactating women, are able to get the requisite treatment and also the requisite supplies to be able to improve their well-being. Faith community also played a role in land acquisition. Like we said, they are grassrooted, and they have played several advocacy roles in even shifting policies at the provincial level, making sure that land is able to be available to the most vulnerable population, especially targeting farmers groups, farmers association, and also saving groups. They have been very much instrumental in the provision of land because they also own huge land in this country. So they have been able to provide land for farming associations, and they have been able to organize and mobilize these groups to grow more food for the sustenance of their livelihood. So they are not just involved into the immediate response, but they also transition, not just for the immediate response, but they support communities, the most vulnerable population, to be able to grow food. And they also organize them into savings group to be able to increase their revenue and raise money to support their families, including children, for better healthcare, good education. So faith communities are very influential and very instrumental in this. In the event of conflict also, they have been playing a very great role in holding government accountable. They have been able to sustain peace in most parts of this country. So for locations where people are very much involved into agricultural production, the faith communities have been able to engage government to increase support to these communities, to ensure that peace is sustained in these communities. They have called on government, local government, and national government to ensure that extension services to farmers group associations are available so that productivity can increase and these most vulnerable population are able to sustain their livelihood. A case study is in Kwango, where we had our APs program. That was a very huge success, where the faith community were able to change the lives of the most vulnerable population. They were able to organize themselves into farmer groups. They were able to organize themselves into savings group, and they were able to advocate for land for this group and also advocating for extension services from the government perspective so that these people are able to have a full value chain system, that when they grow their crops, they're able to take their crops to the market, and that potentiality exists so that the community can be self-sustaining for the betterment and the growth of their livelihood. So these are some of the critical roles faith community have been playing, unique roles and very sustainable role they have been playing in the sustenance of the food system in the DRC, and also playing very major advocacy role, holding government to account to ensure that the basic extension services, agricultural support are made available to the most vulnerable population. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Manu.
Thank you, Patrick. I think our speaker is here. Can we give her the opportunity to speak?
Okay. I think she registered as Phil. I have changed the name
Shazo, yes.
to Shaza. And
yes, Shaza.
And if you can hear me, shuts up. Can you please accept the invitation to move to the panelist group?
Yeah, wonderful. Yes.
Okay, I think she moved, and
yes,
she should be able to talk now. Yeah.
Yes, please unmute yourself, Shazo Hamo, and we look forward to hearing from you. Welcome. I have already introduced you. Please speak.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. هل الصوت واضح؟
Yes, very clear.
Assalamu alaikum. اسمعونني؟ هل يتم سماع الصوت؟ ألو؟
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Sarah Issa, can you please invert your interpretation?
تمام. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا شذى حمو من شمال غرب سوريا، مديرة مؤسسة أمان. طبعا ناشطة نسوية في منطقة إدلب، أعمل في مجال تمكين المرأة المهجرة قسرا والمهجرة داخليا، أدعم المعنفات في الشمال السوري. طبعا مشروعنا هو يعتمد على النشاط القائم بحد ذاته للمرأة. طبعا احنا انا كمان ايضا عضو في تحالف نساء شمال افريقيا والشرق الاوسط.
Can I step in quickly? Yes. Can everybody hear me?
طبعا احنا معنيين
Yes, I am kindly asking participants to select Portuguese, select English so they can hear the translation appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. طبعا احنا كعضو في التحالف، نحن كأعضاء في التحالف شمال غرب سوريا، عملنا على المرأة السورية بكافة المجالات. طبعا احنا كشبكة أمان كان لدينا العديد من النشاطات. طبعا هي أعمالنا كمان كانت قائمة بحد ذاتها في الدمج المجتمعي والأمن الغذائي. في كارثة الزلزال تم توقيف بعض أعمالنا بسبب الأضرار الكبيرة التي تعرضت لها المنطقة. طبعا كان في دمار كتير كبير بالمنازل وتشرد عدد كبير من الأطفال. هذا الشيء دفعنا نحن نساء الائتلاف للتضامن والوقوف بجانب النساء المتضررات. طبعا نحن حققنا هذا الشيء عن طريق تنظيم مجموعات عامة على الواتساب. كان لدينا 3 مجموعات، كل مجموعة تحتوي على 10 نساء. الهدف الأكبر من ذلك هو إعادة الأمل والإرادة لهؤلاء النساء ولتطوير مشاريعهم بأقل التكاليف وتمكين الأمهات من الزراعة وتأمين الغذاء لمنازلهم، لأنهم هن بحد ذاتهم المسؤولات بالدرجة الأولى على أسرهم بسبب الحالة الاقتصادية وبسبب الضعف أو العجز الاقتصادي الخاضعة لها المناطق في شمال غرب سوريا. نحن لدينا طبعا منطقة خضراء، أرض خصبة، بالرغم من التغيير المناخي اللي طرأ على المنطقة في السنوات الأخيرة. وبما أن المنطقة تعتبر معزولة فمن الضروري جدا استغلال هاي الأراضي والموارد والجهود للنهوض بهاي المنطقة. طبعا يحتاج هذا العمل الزراعي للمتابعة بشكل مستمر. أهلنا هؤلاء الأمهات من خلال جلسات الدعم النفسي للأمن الغذائي. طبعا تم تأهيل هؤلاء النساء بشكل مباشر وتعليمهم كيفية الزراعة. وضعنا أقدامهم على الخطوط الأولى من هذا العمل. الفكرة طبعا بدأت من 2021 حيث بدأت الدول تحتفل بما علمنا بمخرجات مشروع الأمن الغذائي. طبعا عملنا على تنفيذ دورات سنوية لتقييم التقدم المحرز والاستفادة منه كائتلاف. الفكرة بحد ذاتها هي فرصة لتزيد التشبيكات والتنسيقيات التي ستقام مع منظمات تعمل بالأمن الغذائي، فتزداد نسبة العمل بحال حصولنا على الدعم المادي. بالنسبة للوازع الديني، كان يوجد سؤال بالنسبة للوازع الديني. في جلسات الدعم النفسي يلي تم تقديمها، فكان الوازع الديني أمر كتير كتير ضروري عملنا عليه بهذا الأمر من خلال التوكل على الله وعلاقة الدين في الزراعة، من خلال قول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: لا يزرع مسلما زرعا غرسا فيأكل منه طير أو إنسان أو بهيمة إلا كان له به صدقة. أيضا حديث آخر: ما من رجل يغرس غرسا إلا كتب الله من الأجر قدرا ما يخرج من ثمر ذلك الغرس. فالإسلام يعتمد على الاتكال وإثبات الذات، ومن جهة أخرى نعمل في المشروع على تعدد الديانات، فهو قائم على الدمج ما بين الفئة الأقلية المسيحية الذين هاجروا من قبل من اليعقوبية والقناي فعادوا إليها، وما بين المسلمين الموجودين في الداخل لكسب مهارات وتبادل الخبرات والاستفادة من علمهم بما فيهم من كبار السن. فكان الاتصال يكون معهم عن طريق التحالف. طبعا لدينا بعض الأمثلة عن هؤلاء النساء، عن هؤلاء الأمهات الذين خضعوا لجلسات الدعم النفسي. فكانت نتائج التأهيل النفسي هي ليلى لديها أرض صغيرة، فكان لديها مشروع صغير، فعملت على تسميد هذه الأرض وزرعها بالمواد اللازمة. طبعا بعد الأزمة، بعد الحرب الطويلة، بعد كارثة الزلزال، قامت بإعادة تأهيل التربة بأرضها من خلال تسميدها بالمواد العضوية التي لا تحتوي على مواد كيميائية، وكانت تكلفتها أقل وممتازة للتربة وأفضل من الأسمدة الحيوية والكيميائية. طبعا هي عملت كل هذا الأمر لتوفير الغذاء لأسرتها من خلال زرعها لجميع أنواع الخضروات الأساسية. مددت شبكة مياه بسيطة واعتمدت على نفسها بكامل أمور الفلاحة رغم التحديات التي تواجهها. لديها طموح كبير ببيع الخضروات للسوق لتأمين مدخول لهذه الأسرة، وسوف نتابع العمل معها في مشروع الدمج ما بين المسيحيات المسنات والمعنفات والمهجرات المسلمات. طبعا بفضل من Women's Food Collection ودعمهم لنا، طبعا زاد وعينا واطلعنا على السياسات اللي تعتني بجهود الجمعيات المحلية بمجال الأمن الغذائي إن فود. كانت الداعم لنا بكل مراحل العمل، حيث هي أتاحت لنا الفرصة والتشبيك والدعم والوعي وفهم النظم الغذائية العالمية والطريق لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. نحن كجمعيات محلية نسوية نجد الفرص للمشاركة والدعم وتكاد تكون منعدمة نظراً للأسباب المتعددة الخاصة بمنطقتنا. أيضاً لدينا الأم خنساء التي بعد جلسات الدعم النفسي حاولت العمل مع أسرتها بالحليب والجبن والتصبير واللبن. فكانت أيضاً امرأة فعالة في المجتمع من خلال جلساتها للدعم النفسي والأمن الغذائي. طبعا من خلال اطلاعنا على الجهود والسياسات اللي تعتني بدعم جهود الجمعيات المحلية بمجال الأمن الغذائي والمرأة. ألو.
Yes, thank you, Shazo. Thank you so much for
شكرا.
that intervention.
طبعا الوعي العام كان في عنا دور المؤسسات الدينية ومشاريع الأمن الغذائي محدودة نوعا ما، طبعا لطبيعة الظروف والأولويات والضغوطات اللي موجودة في المنطقة، لكن نحن قمنا بالتواصل مع كنيسة القنية لتسهيل التشبيكات مع المسنات وبناء الثقة ما بيننا. كذلك عملنا على أسس دينية لتأكيدهم على أهمية الدمج المجتمعي ما بين المجموعتين. هذا الشيء سهل لنا المرحلة القادمة لتأمين الغذاء بكل المختصات في المشروع. طبعا لم نجد غير الوازع الديني لإعادة الأمل والتأكيد على دور الأمهات في التأكيد على التفكير الإيجابي واستغلال المساحات الخضراء في المنزل لتأمين الغذاء، وهي نعم الحلول بظل هذه الأزمة. طبعا أنا شذا بما أنه أنا تحكي وائل ائتلاف، كان لدي قدرنا نأمن بعض الروابط يلي كانت عن طريق التحالف من أجل دعم هؤلاء النساء كليلى وكالأم ليلى والأم خنساء. فأتت عن طريق هذه الروابط دعم مادي بسيط ساعدهم على نوعا ما بداية بمشروع بسيط يساعدهم على تأمين الأمن الغذائي بهم نوعا ما.
Thank you so much. I would like to briefly, before summarizing, Denisa, do you have some points to add to what is the unique role of faith values or the faith community in driving this transformation? Then we can summarize this section and we'll go into a short section after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Shazo, for sharing and being with us and joining. As we talk about transformation and also tools to be able to navigate how food systems transformation is initiated, but also approach with solidarity amongst allies and tribal nations and indigenous peoples, there are some critical points that I would like to share. Sorry. Shaza, can you mute for 1 second? Okay, thank you. Talking about decolonizing solidarity is really important. Recognizing the histories of indigenous peoples and the experiences that indigenous peoples have faced, understanding how history impacts the livelihood and also the realities of today of tribal nations. Thinking about decolonizing solidarity in a way where we nurture curiosity and have the respect for one another, despite the diversity and the differences. It is important as we think about collective synergy and collective action, because ultimately, as humankind, we are thinking about collective healing. And so as we think about how we do our work, we're also considering the speed of how we do our work. And sometimes that is very slow. And slowness is only a sign of care. And it is true inclusion on how we operate at the speed of trust. Data many times in tribal nations operates by the speed of trust, and so does the relationships in our food systems. And we should not be afraid to engage with humans. We did a study back in 2017, a national groundbreaking study, and some of the comments that came back is that Indigenous peoples are sometimes seen as not human. And so this is important to understand the dominating narratives that are out there and how we dispel these narratives and the stereotypes. And so when we think about decolonizing solidarity, we think about the origin and nature and methods of human knowledge. And in the work that we do, this is called epistemologies. And we think about the nature of existence or being and understanding that from an Indigenous perspective, and that is called ontologies. And then the last one that I want to point out is looking at the historical and also historic linguistic change and how Indigenous languages have been colonized, but also our people have been prevented from speaking and implementing their languages and this is what you call etymologies. And so when we think about reparations and reconciliation, restoration, all of these words, we need to consider the process of that and how that happens, but also true engagement really honors the traditions and cultures of Indigenous peoples and tribal nations. And in these traditions and ancestral knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, there are solutions, there are strategies for the global challenges that we face. And so as we think about the work that we are doing, we put joy and justice at the center of our work. And this is something that is held near and dear to our hearts because we work with the youth and everyone to the elders. And this is something that is a very special engagement as we think about doing this work with families and communities. And so I just thank everyone for listening, but those are the recommendations that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll just, it's quite, I think I would be, I do not want to spend a lot of time summarizing. It has been such a rich contributions from these resource persons. I would just like to highlight in a minute or so what before we go into some final comments before we open it for Q&A. Now, one thing is our precious resource persons have given their experiences from very diverse contexts, but it draws some very common lessons. From DRC, Patrick is coming from DRC. This whole region is bigger than the whole of Western Europe. It's a huge country which is so rich, but the people are facing so many challenges, complex challenges. But it's very clear. But before we come into the lessons, then of course the Navajo Nation, huge regions, people dispossessed, their history stolen, the land stolen, tremendous impact of colonization of the mind and the body and the land. Then you have also from northeastern Syria, Idlib, very, very rich cultural and tremendously fertile lands being torn apart by violence. But very clearly, the faith communities and the communities on the ground have the confidence of the people. They have their trust. So you have to understand, it's just not enough faith in big picture, but faith has to be practiced and experienced on the ground, because faith can be applied in different ways. But here we see it that they are striving to make resources available. And there is tremendous, and whoever has succeeded by like the organizations of Patrick, they have succeeded because they have respected the local knowledge. They've respected the local leadership. There is tremendous amount of agency. There is kinship. We need to have solidarity. So when we work with these people, we need to respect their histories, their heritage, their knowledge, and we need to tap into that. And we see that the solutions will be only brought if we are able to work together with humility. But the small communities are very important because solutions come from the ground and it doesn't come from the big, a few decision makers. Now, we need to move quickly because we need to give some time for Q&A. So I would request you three speakers, give very short comments. I would like you to give it just in 1 minute. Shazo first, then Denisa, and then finally Patrick. Not more than 1 minute. What recommendations would you make to all actors on food system transformation to drive more effective faith engagement, community engagement? Shazo. Is my question clear? Your recommendations that would make all actors on food systems transformation to drive more effective engagement of the people, community, and faith. You are muted, so maybe unmute yourself. Otherwise, can you start, Patrick? Briefly, very briefly.
Yes, I can start with this. So, two major recommendations I want to mention in 2 minutes, in 1 minute, sorry. The first one is we should institutionalize the faith community into disaster management system. Because, like I mentioned earlier, they are the first responder. So they have a huge stake in the functioning of disaster management. So they should be fully institutionalized into committees of disaster management, especially at the local and provincial level. The second recommendation I would say is that they are the stakeholders, they bridge the nexus and localization initiative. Faith communities are locally based. They have all local resources, and bridging them into the nexus approach that leads towards localization and sustainability and transformation, they could play a huge, huge impact in that direction. Thank you, and over to you, Manuel.
Thank you, Patrick. Shaza, have you managed to understand the question, and can you respond in Arabic? What will be your key recommendations? I mean, maybe we will try again. Denisa?
Yes. Some key recommendations that I have, and thank you, Patrick, for sharing your recommendations of including faith. And this is really important as we look at frameworks and Indigenous frameworks and thinking about Indigenous social determinants of health and also Indigenous social determinants of health equity. That includes the faith and also spiritualities and faith systems of Indigenous peoples, and recognizing that, as I mentioned before, that through the prayers and the prophecies and also the need to intervene into the global challenges are centered in ancestral knowledge and wisdom that comes from the spiritualities of Indigenous peoples. And as we think about these different ways of approaching the work and understanding this, is understanding that healing too is defined by the communities because the solutions come from the communities, and they should be, when we're talking about defining health and care, is understanding the cultural infrastructure that lays at the center of the work, at the center of strategy, but also at the center of the need to be able to hold these dialogues on an international level, to be able to engage, to be able to use the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples at the core value of state nations or nation states, and being able to engage in a way that is effective, that is advocating for the roles of Indigenous peoples to be at the table and to be a part of the dialogue and the conversation, but also the implementation of these solutions for food systems and also for faith systems, as we engage the two, and the need to be able to do that in a very critical time as we think about climate change and as we think about the loss of biodiversity and also the loss of our culture and languages, and thinking about the restoration and healing for everyone. Back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. And before opening up the floor, I just want to, I was listening to Shaza Hamo's presentation, and what I could draw from her presentation and what may point to some recommendations is that the clarity that she was talking about women, actually those who are in the margins of society, being trained, the land, they were actually doing the farming. And when you see, in many places, I mean, 70% of farming is actually done by women, but only 20% are in their name. And it indicates that the people who are most marginalized need to be able to have hands-on ways of making a difference in their lives. They can't only be on the receiving end. And of course, and the women leadership. And of course, she indicated on the importance of also working across, faith groups. And it's amazing that, they even through natural disasters. So you see, in Patrick's circle of food insecurity, you can one more box of natural disasters apart from conflict, climate change, and economic stress. So I think these are some points which I could. But Shaza, I think she is now. Yes, please. Please, can you summarize in a few points some recommendations? Yes.
Yes. أنا معكم. التوصيات أو الحلول يلي نحن حابين نحكي فيها كمؤسسة أمان، أو باسم مؤسسة أمان للجهات الفاعلة بتحويل النظم الغذائية لحتى نقدر نشارك أكثر بالمشاركة الدينية الفعالة، هي أول شيء التركيز على الدعم النساء والمنظمات المحلية النسوية. أيضاً أنه يكونوا عندنا فرص أكبر للمنظمات المحلية بمناطق الشمال، والعمل مع الديانات، كمثل المشروع يلي نحن عم نقترحه اللي اقترحناه عليكم سابقا بشمال غرب سوريا. أيضا توفير الإمكانيات للتدريب الإداريين بوضع الطلبات وتعليمهم طريقة وضع الطلبات، لأنها طبعا عائق اللغة الإنجليزية تعتبر عائق بالنسبة لنا، لأنه نحن ما كتير مخضرمين بمجال اللغة، فنأمل بتسهيل الأمر أكثر من ذلك. أخذ فكرة المشروع الأمن الغذائي بالنسبة لشمال سوريا على محمل الجد وتكاتف المنظمات، زيادة الوعي نحو هذا الأمر ونشر المعرفة التي تساعدنا بتحقيق أحلامنا بالنسبة للأمن الغذائي في الداخل السوري.
Thank you so much. Now, thank you very much for that. And of course, also raising the issue of language is so important. And we're very grateful for the organizers to have Arabic interpretation. And of course, Denisa raised the issue of language hegemony and language being used as also as a tool for colonization. So let's work towards that people being able to speak and learn and work in their own language. We go into about 10 minutes of Q&A. There are two questions that have come. there is a person who represents from the Taoist Foundation of India, Secretary General from Northeast India. Through our indigenous peoples, though our indigenous people at present following different religions, but we are still following our indigenous food systems in philosophy of Taoist, and which our ancestors followed. But due to the modern context, again, due to loss of biodiversity, environment, and climate change, our indigenous food values are being lost. We are losing the identity. What would be your suggestions related? So the other question is also highlighting about the indigenous food systems. Can you? This is the first question. So all three of you, can you give some thoughts briefly? Patrick?
So there are lots of reflection around climate change and the impact of climate change, particularly, for example, in the DRC. And this question is very relevant because how do we maintain our indigenous food for the population? How do they maintain it? So one of the ways or reflection that is happening is to ensure that the faith community is part of the policy dialogue or policy discussion that is underway with the local authority of the DRC to focus a lot more around environmental sustainability, climate action programming. So a lot of discussions around that in smart agriculture programming to ensure that the basic indigenous food is maintained and kept to its standard. But in the meantime, also, there are discussions around alternative food consumption. So in the DRC, like I said earlier, DRC has 4 different regions, a very big country with 4 big regions, and each of these regions have stable food. But there is a discussion on the way to see how these different staple food can be consumed by all of the regions. So these conversations are happening, and because of climate actions, there are a lot of conversation also. Faith community has been involved to ensure that prevention measures are also maintained, and also smart agriculture programming are focused on through the investment of government and also other international organizations. Thank you.
Denisa?
Yes, such an important question as we move towards implementation and revitalization of our cultural values and our identity and our traditions. And one of the really critical, important aspects of talking about that restoration, but also managing to keep our identity, is thinking about the reparations, the impacts of colonization that has affected our communities for generations now. We need to speak more on how we can repair the damage from injustices, because we come from a legacy of injustices, and recognizing what reparations would look like for us and being in that dialogue. We do not want to be told what healing looks like for us. We want to be a part of that discussion of what healing does look like for our communities and how this impacts us. How does this impact indirectly, but also directly when conversations on the national level or even on the global level are held without Indigenous peoples, is important to think about how we can engage in this dialogue of faith and food systems. The second thing that I have to share is about epistemic violence. The knowledge systems that are held, that dominantly are shared in our schools, in academia, and also in research, is important to recognize who is creating that knowledge. Is it with community? Is it centered with community members at the core? Or is it knowledge that is being produced that harms communities and also harms the narratives, but also the practices of our people and our communities? And so as we think about knowledge sharing and knowledge systems, knowledge bearers, and knowledge interpreters, it is important to think of incorporating multi-epistemic researchers into the work that we are doing, because it's a multifaceted dialogue that we're having here, and it's going to take multiple partners to be able to contribute towards the solutions and also the strategies. Thank you. Back to you, moderator.
Shaza, do you have any points on this? Because we'll wind this up and go to the next and last final point. So it is very clear that there is a lot of about injustices, about knowledge management itself. Yes, Shaza. Please.
أمثل مؤسسة الطاوية في الهند كأمين عام ألو
Yes, continue, Shaza. You unmuted yourself. I don't know what happened. You muted yourself. Yes. Okay.
يوجد صوت.
Yeah, we can hear now. Please continue.
الاقتراحات هي دائما تأتي على وتر التوعية بالعمل بكيفية العمل مع التغير المناخي، طبعا بسبب فقدان التنوع البيولوجي والبيئي وتغير المناخ. الاقتراح الأساسي هو التوعية بمجال التوعية بالشكل الأساسي، وبسبب ارتفاع درجات الحرارة هذا الشيء عم يهدد تغيير المناخ بجانب عمل بيئي مختلف، اكثار من حفر الآبار بمناطقنا، لأنه مناطقنا طبعا نوعا ما قليلة بالمياه، لدينا نقص بالمياه. التوصية الأكبر يلي نحن منوجهها هي دعم المؤسسة بالأمن الغذائي اللي بيكون بيعطي قوة أكثر لمناطقنا.
Thank you so much, Shaza. And it's very important also, when you look into the what Shaza is saying, it is so critical, the climate change, water, and also connecting up with the indigenous peoples. You have a lot of indigenous knowledge in resilience in places where there is less water, Spain or North Africa. We need to tap into some of these ancient knowledges and respect. And Denisa mentioned about knowledge control. And so epistemology, I mean, who controls, which is the knowledge that we have to, so we're respecting the knowledge. And of course, there are comments about national problems. I mean, we need to policy change where nations are going to recognize these cultures and indigenous peoples. Now, just as a final, if you can briefly say, in a minute each, is actually comments related to that many faith communities only engage around food at the level of charity. How can faith communities think more about systemic change? And there was another question about, that people trust faith organizations. What is the interaction between people and faith communities, leaders that creates this trust? So two questions. What is it that creates the trust as opposed to other leaders? And the other is, how can we move from just charitable to more challenging the food systems? Please. Denisa?
Yes.
ممكن جاوب كجواب أخير. Yes, and to answer.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes. هلا أنا دائما بقول إنه لازم تكون الأولوية الرئيسية هي لمناطقنا، لأنه على مدى العقد المقبل رح تكون هي معالجة لتدهور حالات الأمن الغذائي يلي عم تتضاعف نتيجة آثار تغيير المناخ وانخفاض الإنتاج الزراعي والنمو السريع للسكان والزحف العمراني. هذا الشيء بيدعو للتشجيع إنه تكون هي الأولوية إلنا، فبتنعكس على المبادرات المشتركة ما بين إفريقيا وباقي مناطق العالم. أيضا الدول الأعضاء بالاتحاد الأفريقي يعني هي التزمت قبل هالمرة بإنهاء الجوع بحلول عام 2025، فيوجد برنامج شامل للتنمية الزراعية لدينا.
Thank you. Thank you. A call for solidarity across regions, and so that we can actually respond to our local challenges. Briefly, can you also, Denisa and Patrick, in that order?
Yes, one of the really important aspects of supporting tribal autonomy and tribal sovereignty and agency is thinking about how to be engaged in the political arena. And the political engagement is really important on how faith actors, but also faith leaders and faith organizations can be engaged in supporting that autonomy. And this is really important. I think we've seen this discussion happening through the pandemic, because when governments were slow to act and help communities, it was the faith organizations and faith leaders that stepped in to help communities, to feed communities, to pray for communities, to hold community together, and be also in solidarity in their suffering and in the grief. Because when we talk about tribal communities and local communities, we are talking also about the pre-existing disparities and inequities that existed before the pandemic. And so when we think about also the nature of how extreme the grief, the loss, the pain has been, it is these organizations that have been able to understand at the very local level what the community has been going through and also what they continue to suffer through. So it's important to hear the testimonies and also to hear how the interventions can be appropriate to intervene in political engagements, but also the need to support the autonomy and agency of communities at the local level and bringing that back up to the national and also to the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Denisa. So, yeah, very, very clear. So that is, Denisa is asking, moving from charity is actually to approach the political process, policy level change. And because they are connecting to the people, they know the pain, they're able to bring about policy change. So that's a change push that we have to make. Patrick?
Yes, how do we move from charity to a more sustainable approach, full system approach through policies and advocacy related engagement? So in the DRC, I gave a case study. We have a dynamic of context. We have the conflict context where you have routine displacement of people. In that context, the faith leaders focus more on charity intervention. But in the context where we have resilience programming, they have been involved more into advocacy for land rights. For example, in 2 of our APs, the communities have been able to own farmers groups, farmers associations, savings groups have been able to own their own land, and they are producing every other time on a seasonal basis. They are producing their own food. So the faith leaders have been able to be very much strategic based on the prevailing context. They have been moving from just aid to more of sustainable food system through advocacy for land rights and also through advocacy for extension services to the most affected population, and also advocacy involving financial autonomy, autonomization. They have been engaged with even financial institutions like banking financial institutions to be able to provide loans to savings groups. So these are some of the transformation that faith communities are moving gradually towards more sustainable system rather than a charity system. And the first question about trust, why faith leaders are trusted. the context of DRC, Christianity or faith brings together people. So that's the first thing. Faith brings people together. People are from different regions and they have different values, cultural values, but the fact that faith serves as a symbol of unity. So interfaith serves as a symbol of unity for different people from different regions. So that is why they are very trusted, and people put all the trust, information sharing and everything that keep people informed and abreast of their life on a daily basis. The faith community are well informed and they are the source of information because of the unity faith brings in this context of DRC. Thank you, and over to you, Mano.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the resource persons, but for their wonderful contributions. But also, I'm sorry we have to limit the Q&A session. And thank you for your questions. There are a few more questions that are unanswered. But I beg your indulgence, all of you, just for about 4 minutes, 5 minutes more. We are almost on ending. The time is up, but give us 5 more minutes so we can wind up in a good way. And we have been blessed with our colleagues who are organizing the knowledge management. The person who's responsible for knowledge management, Michael Belmo. I invite him to give a few announcements, because a lot of wonderful resources have been shared. How will we actually move forward? Michael, please come in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manuel. So here a quick announcement. So we will not share this recording and other post-webinar resources immediately after this call. We will have to wait for the next dialogue, which is on the 25th, to share all post-webinar resources and all resources mentioned during this call. So it's also good that we know that Dialogue 3 will be an official UN FSS virtual site event on the 25th, as Andrea mentioned earlier. And in this event, we will have World Vision's advocacy and external engagement partnership leader who will be presenting or responding to the lessons during this dialogue in collaboration with other panelists. We would also have Ruth from Kenya. She's a youth advocate and FMNR practitioner. She will also be sharing her experiences. And to also ensure ease of joining, the next dialogue, we have removed passcodes and replaced with other authentication types. And I also want to use this opportunity to apologize, for the glitches we experienced. Faith and development, World Vision Faith and Development has a community of practice. So if you want to receive our resources real time and participate in our webinars, things like this, I'm sending you links, well, basically 2 links to register for Dialogue 3 and also join our community of practice. So thank you so much, and over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, friends. It is very difficult to summarize what has happened, but what is very important, what is important to remember, we have these 3 wonderful sharing of Patrick, of Shazo, and from Denisa, from 3 different regions, from the painted deserts of the Navajo Nation, from the beautiful land of Levant, and from DRC, which is literally one of the last remaining lungs of the world. So, but the people in these lands have similar challenges, and when we face the challenges, you heard from these discussions that when we have to go back to our roots, we have to respect our traditions. We'll have to make sure that community experience is connected with policy change. We need to build on the trust that the faith communities have. There is tremendous hope in a very rapidly changing and challenging world, but we need to reach back and go back to the roots of the communities, and that has been the focus of this webinar. A local faith communities who have the good practice, who have many of the solutions, and we cannot solve the problems of the world without going back to the front lines where they are dealing with these communities. And thank you so much for all of you who have sat through this 1.5 hours, who have registered and spent your precious times across the world. We may have not been able to address all your questions, but thank you for your presence, your attention, for your spirited engagement. And thank you so deeply, Patrick, Denisa, and Shaza, for your time and for your sharing. Thank you very much for the interpreters who have been interpreting and making this possible. Thank you for all the people in the communication, the organizers, Michael, Andrea, and all the people behind the scenes who have made this happen. And as we conclude, I invite Denisa to close with a poem, and following which I hope you will all engage with the final concluding webinar, and we'll continue this engagement. Welcome, Denisa. And you will close this webinar with this poem.
Thank you for this rich dialogue, and to everyone. My prayer in the years ahead and generations ahead is centered around what we say in Dene. It is a word, sihasin, and it means an expectation of goodness, an anticipation of strength and capacity, assurance of positivity and growth, and it also means reflection. The word sihasin is a reflection of intergenerational responsibility and investment. Sihasin means hope. As I think of you all and our ways forward, I pray you hold one another in your hearts. I share this poem that I wrote earlier in the pandemic, standing at the river praying. I hope it blesses you all. Sihasin. Liberation and restoration surround us, refreshing like the cool breeze on a warm day, like the power of flowing brisk water of our sacred rivers. Our hearts beat with the realities of suffering and pain all around us, like the snow that waits to melt into the river, like the rocks that wait to be greeted by the spring. We wait for healing. Like the air circulating freely, roaming freely in abundance, we pray for freedom, an increased overflow of hope, joy, love, and peace. Like the tall willows along the river bank, we wait for our turn to be refreshed. Like the moment we wait to feel the warmth of the sun on our skin at dawn, we wait another day, another night to be healed. Trauma lingers with unpredictability, like the disruption in our gardens and fields from climate change. We wait like our crops to be rescued by the rain, waiting, dry, and roasted. Like hills and mountains wait for company, so do the pillars of our families, our elders and our vulnerable, waiting. Listen to the birds who greet us from dawn to dusk. We are still here. The moon and stars shine brightly, blessing us with existence and wonder, but there's a long line for healing. While we wait, we express our gratitude for the air. We honor the aspiration in our lungs. We pray for this moment, this breath. As we pause, we see, hear, smell, and feel our blessings that surround us today. We are reminded we are still able to breathe. Healing is on the way. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and bye-bye. Please register for the next webinar. Thank you, Michael. Andrea, was it?
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate everyone bearing with the technology. Shazza, glad you managed to join us. Thank you for persevering.
Yes.
Maybe you want to stop the recording too?